Today you'll see me climb to about the 150-foot level on I believe it's a Ron 45 tower. I'm not exactly sure. To recover a DB224, I say recover. We're going to move it to an adjacent tower and use it on an amateur radio repeater, the 147.315. As you see there, I'm getting the rope ready. That's about 400 feet of rope, and it's going to be quite the task to climb this tower. Although I thought it was going to be a lot easier with the ladder being on this side, but as you can see, this was the unexpected. Every little thing became a chore, and I even have a hazard at one point. And see, here you'll see me try to actually climb on the ladder face and squeeze in between the two cables from the tower hut. But there's nothing to step on that last bottom portion to defeat you know kids and teenagers from trying to climb up there. So I have to get kind of creative and go around the other side. There's the monkey go. Now he's above it. And here's where I step off here for just a second, try to get a hold of what's going on here, and get my rope attached to me. Now, it's kind of weird that we're climbing this time of year. This was January the 2nd, and usually there's about, maybe a foot of snow on the ground. But for some reason this year it seems to be pretty dry. In fact, we did some climbing a few days before and a few days after this day. You can kind of see there the sun's peeking out through the clouds, and also just made a mistake there. If you caught that, that was me clipping on to a cross member and not around the tower post, which I know is not ideal. However, it's a lot easier to move, and at this point in the tower, I feel pretty confident myself, and you know, I'll probably step on that rung later. So 250 pounds, isn't gonna. It'll really test the strength of that cross brace anyway. But it is better to go around the actual post of the tower in case that was to break. Hopefully, it would slide and catch on another brace that hopefully is stronger. And you'll see there I did sort of like an uppercut to grab that cross brace. I did it again, see? And sort of monkey yourself up. And it was about this point that I've kind of found out that rope kind of got in the way. At least the rope, hanging there with the rope with the monkey hook. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm also going to cut the audio out of the actual video recording because it was a bit windy, and later on you'll see why. Extremely windy. And I kept on bumping my head, and it makes this sharp thunk sound in the camera, but it's completely, you don't notice it when you're climbing. Like, see right there? You really don't notice it while wearing a hard hat. That's why one of the things why you really should wear a hard hat is because if you're like me and you have a tendency to crawl up the tower, it definitely would help. Looks like the hut needs a little bit of a roof work. There, the idiot figures it out. Alright. Also a piece of loose feed line. It may not look like it on video, especially with the fish-eyed lens. However, these tower ladder spacings, I guess you'd call it, the cross members that you step on, are uncomfortably at a wide space, and especially for a person wearing blue jeans, it makes it very uncomfortable to have to stretch. I have to, in my case, put my left or right foot, pull it just above the knee of the other leg in order to reach the next step, and climbing to about the 150-foot level makes that extremely uncomfortable. And you'll see me there. I have to rest, and I've also decided that this is probably the last time I'm going to use my positioning lanyard on a tower like this. at least one of this kind with the strap. What I really should do is get the hook in the middle that I can just clip off somewhere. But that strap there would make it much nicer if I needed to swing out a little bit away from the tower and work on an antenna. But it made this a very grindy task having to feed it through. If you see there, the clouds are gray. So what happened this day was I'm going to get up to just pretty much the base of the antenna, and it's going to be pretty windy. But then I hear two claps of thunder, and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to have enough time to drop on a. See, you can almost see my phone there, just out of shot. But I got up towards the antenna, and we're going to pull this thing down, and then the weather shows up. And in fact, I think I'm checking the local weather radar now. Or that's my email about something. I think that was actually my email. Anyway, we get up there. I get up there, and I hear a few claps of thunder, and as you said, as a bear if this was to get up, it's going to be even worse going down when you're sore and tired. So I decided to, even though I was actually up there and could have taken down the antenna, decided that it's just best to go on down. There's the John Heddish tower climbing trick of catching the hooks, although it's normally for the fall restraint gorilla hooks, which is, you just saw one there. I found that while I was climbing this tower, I did a lot of my actual lifting with the right leg. And now that wasn't necessarily a good thing because what that ended up doing was putting a lot of strain and load, and it's literally like working out only one of your legs. But it was a lot easier for myself to position and prop myself on my left foot, move the right foot, and then push and pull myself up. Half the time I would push myself up with that leg, as I would in the earlier part, and then as you can see later on, I do a lot more pulling up with my arms. My left arm would hook around that one tower leg and grab onto one of the cross members, and the other one, my right arm, would pull myself up. You can see here I'm having to maneuver some of my stuff around to try to get things repositioned. Dig out my gorilla hook there. That's really what I was doing there. These big, long, spongy cords have a bad tendency of getting tangled up because you have about a 6-foot rope that's hooked from the about the left hip that goes down and then back up to that same left hip D-ring, and it's a bit of a challenge to have to get that around there. That's adjustable to, I think, about 9 feet or something like that, which is quite a lot. It could probably go around that tower and still hold me just fine. Of course, the problem with that is if you're just leaning back, you still have the tendency, if you slip, you're going to fall. And there you can see just above the first set of guide wires, the feed line for that antenna. That antenna there is the one we're going to take down. Its feed line was cut. I'm assuming it was probably copper theft, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense why they would take that feed line and not the others. I'm not really sure, to be honest. You can see there I'm taking a break, and no, the tower's not rusty. That's it's where it's been painted a red section. They're not sure if there was a new law passed or something, and then they ended up repainting it over white. Either way, it's still kind of a little bit chippy, but that's what you can get on some of these older towers. But some of that newer feed line, which is right that goes through my hook there, looks to be in really good shape. Although there's nothing really in this building besides a UHF repeater. And I believe those feed lines went to a FM broadcast. Now, there's other FM broadcast stations up there on this mountain, but this particular site does not have one. See there, I'm trying to figure out a way to place and position my feet. If the dummy would turn and look at the tower he just showed, you might be able to see my good friend Tim on the other tower working on the microwave system. We had a lightning strike about maybe a month back. Yeah, you can just barely see him off the tower there. It's that black dot. Anyway, on that first tower. But we had a lightning strike at one of our, or I shouldn't say one of ours, one of his main sites where he feeds a network with internet. And after he went up there and he replaced a lot of the radios and flashed new firmware on it, well, it was the wrong firmware. And still, about a few weeks later, we're just now recovering from that. It was quite the incident, and we both learned a lot about these things, and thankfully, I'm a network guy myself, and I'm more of a hardware guy on that sort of end of it, and it was all above my head, and thankfully, Tim had a bunch of great people who probably may or may not want to be mentioned, so I won't mention them here, that helped him out on that project. One thing I noticed about this tower, which was a little bit odd. Oh, well, now I'm above the first set of guy wires here. The left leg seemed like it had a lot more space between cross members. And that was a little bit precarious, It's kind of like, obviously it does have bracing, but it always seemed like there was an empty spot right where I need to rest, usually. There you can see that I had to move that Ethernet cable that's under my hand. It got caught on, I believe, the pulley. It's going to catch me on the way down as well. So you can see there I'm struggling a little bit to get that positioning lanyard set. There you can see my good friend Professor Vincent, who also has his call sign K5VCA. He's a good friend of mine and works there at the same university I go to. And he heard that I was going to do some climbing and wanted to check it out, so I invited him up there. That's Springdale off there to the right. I'm just kind of giving him a scoop about what's going on, playing with the rope, showing with him, having a good time. That feed line's starting. There's very little wind, and you see how much that thing is out there. That just goes to show you if you use tower clips or like zip ties and use them improperly, that they can really break loose in some of these winds. And if it was really windy, I imagine that could really be a hazard. Later on a different day when we actually drop the antenna, we're going to use that feed line as a piece of what do you want to call it, guy line, to help guide the antenna down to the ground and keep the antennas from hurting itself. It's a cut feed line, it can't really hurt it. However, one thing we didn't think about when we got it to the ground was the strain on the connector on the antenna harness, and it kind of escaped both me and Tim's head that it may do that. However, it was completely all right. We hooked it up to the return loss bridge, and it scanned really good. I forget what the number was there. I think at this point maybe the wind was starting to pick up just slightly. There I go again, trying to lean far off to the left to try to reposition my feet. There you can see, Tim and Vincent. I asked Vincent to get Tim, and I was asking him about that panel off to my right, if we needed to drop that because it wasn't being used. I, I think he said yes, but he said to get on the way back down. Well, we ended up, kind of being a little bit of a rush to get down, so that ended up not happening. We try to clean up stuff if the antenna's been abandoned and used for quite some time. There's no point in having it on the tower unless it's just a complete bear and struggle to get off. But stuff like that, it would have been relatively easy. You see there, I had a little bit of trouble to get that clip to actually clip on to the leg. That was due to the feed line that was strapped along the leg. I kind of find that's annoying when tower climbers do that on occasion. Here we are to the red section, and we're getting there. We're about halfway. I believe we're about halfway between the two guy wire sections and the antenna. A 20-foot behemoth, which looks like it's 40 foot on the tower, is just above me, or just above the second guy wire sections, I should say. Seem to be struggling something here. I believe it's also my the strap. Oh no, there I go. Maybe I was just had a short break or something. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. One thing I will say is to anybody who is a tower climber, on some of these older towers, I've noticed that Romex holds the feed line a lot better. If you use about a 6-inch piece of Romex and you wrap it around the feed line in a tower brace and twist it really good, it'll hold a lot better than these sort of aluminum or metallic clamps or clips. And in fact, one tower that I'm on currently, but moving the repeater off of, there's another repeater there that the feed line, which is great big LDF 650A, is blowing in the wind due to the failure of those clips. Now, the day that that thing was installed, I'm sure it was installed correct to spec. You could see the clips there, but it appeared that the clips had actually come off the tower. You can see there I'm fishing, or trying to fish my lanyard through. Notice how it came out quite a ways there. Sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle, like I said, to fish that thing through. Sometimes it just goes through like butter, and a lot of us tower climbers prefer the latter. There you can see Springdale. And approaching the second guy wires, now you can kind of get an idea of how long that feed line is. And that feed line, you can't find the rest of it on the bottom part of the tower. And that rope, I don't remember exactly the make of it. This was actually one of Tim's ropes, but It was really heavy by this point. You may notice those gloves with the cut off fingertips. I don't know the exact name for them. I always called them the poor man's gloves, uh, or hobo gloves, however you want to call it. I find they're better for tower climbing because it still gives your fingers the dexterity that they need to grip onto certain things like nuts and bolts, but without having to, you know, really make your hand blister up by rubbing against all this rough paint and everything as you go up and down the tower sections. It's a lifesaver. Specifically, my right hand, you can tell it's actually worn a lot more than my right. My right's just dirty, but my left is actually part of the padding's worn. Okay, there we go. I clip it back on, and up we go again. Break time over. Yes, if anybody's asking, that black dot down the road is a deer stand. We have a hunter that'll come up there on that land and hunt. I've seen a few pretty good looking does while I was up there myself. And you see there, I got into a little bit of a precarious situation. I didn't want that feed line to get bumped and open up the clip, which would put me at a risk at falling and the positioning or fall restraint not working correctly because it could slip out and then I'd just fall to the ground, which wouldn't be a good thing. So now I'm pretty much at or above the second set of guy wires. You can see that steel cable on the inside rolling around. They use that. There's a pulley up at the top and at the bottom, and this steel cable goes up and then back down. And on a lot of these towers, they use that for hauling antennas. But some things I've found is the over years' time is they cover those up with feed lines and stuff and make it almost inoperable to use, which is rather annoying. So we usually have to end up bringing our own rigging to bring antennas up and down the tower. Okay, watch this. I clip on and I lean back just like that. And you'll notice there might be one instance whether or not I believe I caught it on camera, but I positioned myself in and the right hook wasn't actually clipped in. And it was a little bit of a scary moment, but that's when you very calmly and coolly pull back into the tower and reach down, pick up the clip, and clip it back on. You can see there from my pants leg that the wind's picking up, and it was at this point that I could really tell a storm was starting to roll in. And after hearing a few claps of thunder later on, that's when I call it it. But right now, I thought it'd just be a bunch of wind, and I'd take a break and let it pass. You can see that the sun's not really peeking through the clouds anymore. It's fairly covered up. Oh, he did it again. Look at that. Did a cross brace. I actually think at that time I stepped on one of the diagonal braces and not the horizontal to give myself a little bit of a easier time to get up. Which is okay if you have pants that or pants, shoes that don't slip too much. And there's the bottom of the antenna. And it was about this time you could hear a few claps of thunder. So I thought I'm going to sit here for just a second and think about it, so to speak. But that's the bottom part of the 20-foot long antenna. Weighs about 40 pounds with all the bracketry, and we will go up there to find out that the brackets that hold that side mount are actually stainless steel, and that's a big no-no because stainless steel likes to corrode and sort of weld itself together, and with weathering, and it you'd have to carry a battery-powered grinder up there, and that's just too much of a chore to do. So we ended up using a different side mount, but it's still going to work just the same. Now I start to head down the tower. It's rather windy at this point, and is definitely a good call. We didn't have much rain out of that storm, but if you want to call it that, but there was a bit of lightning, and so when in doubt, it's better to play it safe and come on down than to linger around. You have to imagine that feed line that's just dangling there in the wind weighs quite a lot. Up there at the where it connects to the antenna, not right at the feed point. There's a bit of a strain relief and a really bad kink, which rendered it useless. You'd have to chop it off and lose about 4 feet on either end to actually get a good hunk of cable there you can install a connector on. But anyway, that that feed line probably weighs about I don't know, 2 or 3 pounds a foot, and when you have 50, 75 feet of it dangling in the air, it tends to add up there at the feed point. Of course, that force is distributed across the whole hunk of feed line. So at the bottom, there's not a lot of downward force because there's most of the weights, just like I said, distributed. It's not like a ball at the end of the string where all the weight's on the ball. It's kind of like a pipe, if you might say, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't. So there you'll see my positioning lanyard just kind of floating in midair. I send it through. I'm kind of struggling a little bit to get it on there. There I get it clipped. And I lean back. You may notice that little bit of tear in my jeans. That came from a different tower. But I call those my climbing jeans. They've had 3 holes in them. All sewn up and repaired, but those are my tried and true jeans that I like using. No sense in tearing up another good pair when I could just use those again. You may note that as you look down behind me, I don't have any buckets or anything with me. And that's because I don't need to. I have deep pocket jackets, deep pockets on my jacket, and I have 2 different speed wrenches, which are sort of like a wrench with a ratcheting feature that allows you to go way down over the bolt, which is better than like a socket set, because who knows how long you have to go down these threads. But anyway, a lot of this tower stuff is pretty standard of half, 7/16, and 9/16. Most of this Decibel Products antenna stuff is 9/16, which you take 2 of those wrenches up there, you could probably take everything down off that tower. You could probably take down the tower itself with just one 9/16 wrench. Oh, I'm joking, of course. You probably couldn't get the those bolts there undone. They look to be a little bit smaller, but that's besides the point. And I believe we're just under the second set of guy wires now, making our trip down. It's This is a lot more of the upper arm strength, having to pretty much hold yourself in as you kind of slide down these cross members. At this point, I'm probably thinking to myself, oh, I just want to get down. Actually, the mentality of a tower climber, you're always supposed to be focused on what you're doing. Think about every little thing you do before you do it, how you do it, when you do it, should you do it. Because if you don't, that can land you into a lot of trouble, both situationally and other means. There you can see I have two of my clips onto the tower, the gorilla hooks. Note that they're staggered, and the purpose of having them staggered like that is if you were to fall and they were on the same level and they were to catch you, the force would be distributed evenly from those two hooks. Now, those two hooks are made of a spongy material that as you fall and the force is applied, it slows you down like a piece of elastic. And by slowing down the time, it slows the impact of force on you. So I'm sure it's not going to be comfortable when you do fall, but it's not going to be a shock thing that could hurt your guts. A lot of times, when you, like say in deer hunting, and you shoot an animal, what kills it is the impact of the bullet, straight into the heart. You could put any size hole into an animal and have them bleed out, but by using a bigger bullet, it stops them dead in their tracks. It's by doing that, it's the force that does that. So by eliminating that force, by increasing time, which would sort of decrease your acceleration, you can therefore decrease the amount of force that's applied to your body. It's F equals ma. It's pretty simple physics, but it can just about save your life. But anyway, having the two hooks, the force is divided among those two hooks, and so the force isn't as apparent, and so they wouldn't work as well on stopping you and slowing you down. So that's why it's always a good idea when if you only have one positioning, if you only have one spot to position, if you use them two at the same time, it's better to have just one hooked on instead of two at the same level. It's better to have, if you're going to use two, have them staggered like that, where one will take more of the load than the other. I see the tricky bit about coming down is as you're coming down, if you put now see my dorsal ring on the back where the two gorilla hooks are attached. There's about my um, I'm not sure what you call it, but just a little bit down from the neck, about 3, 4, 5 inches. And when you hook it, when you take them down, because you're going down, obviously you have to move it down. A lot of people put them down by their feet, and now you can see there this is a bad example, but when I clipped it onto the tower, it actually slid down towards my feet, and I like to keep it a little bit above the knee. Now what that does is that ensures that it doesn't actually get behind my bottom when I'm going down and catches me like a seat or something like that, which can increase the struggle of tower climbing. It's always best to try to minimize the struggle and the force that you have, and to keep it all on the tower or the people on the ground, which is exactly like this antenna. A lot of tower climbers say, oh, I need you to go up there and remove an antenna. But the tower climber's not really doing the removing. He's just going up there with a rope and unloosening some bolts. It's actually the ground crew that would remove the antenna. They're going to man the pulleys and slowly guide its way down there. and the tower climbers really not going to manage that big, huge behemoth of an antenna. There's some they do, and they're pretty tough guys, especially uh, top mounting type antennas without a gin pole, where you had to literally lift a antenna up and over your head into the brackets. You see there, that's that flat panel microwave antenna that's not being used. And you can see the gray cable there that got stuck on me. I also think about this time, that's when I could feel a drop or two land on my hands and, what do you call these things? Wrists. That's what you call them. I'm fairly covered up. You know, it being wintertime, it's probably a mild mid 50 degrees here. Abnormally warm. Talking about worn glove, you can see there. Talk about abnormally warm winter. However, there's stuff to do when we climb. See, you got caught there. Stuff to climb, so might as well go do it. You can see there when I just drop down, which will sort of be like a hard clunk on me, where the camera will jerk a little bit. Whereas when I slide down that cross brace, however it favors my, I believe it's my left leg here. It's a lot easier on the camera and smoother. Sorry, I was watching what I was doing there. This was a real struggle for me. I remember this is where that feed line is right there. It's tied off at that cross member, which it was slid down right where I need to get my lanyard through, and it was really tough to do that, and so I actually had to send it up a little bit higher. So now I'm thinking about what I'm gonna do next. How am I gonna reposition myself? And what I'm gonna do is disconnect that. And see there, it even got caught on the Ethernet cable. That's an old, dilapidated system anyway. It's not currently in use. I imagine it was originally for the FM broadcast station that was there for getting internet up there for their studio transmitter link, which wasn't actually a studio transmitter link. It was just a like an IceCast MP3 audio feed, I'm sure. So right there, I'm observing the strain on that cable, that Ethernet, and I decided it's time somebody needs to do something about that. So I found a piece of wire sticking out there off the side of the conduit, and I grabbed that and sort of twisted back over that way, just to kind of keep it out of the way of future climbers and make it a little bit easier. I think I'm actually mentioning a few words to the professor down there. You see me turn around talking about the microwave panel there. It's hard to talk a lot above about 75, 100 feet or so because your yelling range gets really noisy from the wind noise, the city noise, cars, trucks, things like that. Semis with their Jake brakes, their engine brakes going down the road, are pretty loud up there where you wouldn't notice them on the ground, where the trees sort of act as a natural dampener from the sound. So using the good old yellow phone, as John Haddish would put it, you can see there we transition clips. It kind of becomes a little bit impractical. That transition you saw was the camera splitting to a new track. It does that about every 20 minutes or so. Come on. Come. I believe that's where I also got struggled before there. You can see the paint chipped off. Finally managed to get it open. Come up, off, on the loop. There's the first set of guy wires. You can see there, right there, uh, immediately above that diagonal part, where the hand, right where my hand is, where it's worn, where you can see other tower climbers have put their hands in the exact same spot to pull themselves up, and worn off that sort of area of paint faster and a lot more than some of the others. So see there, you can see the end of the feed line's way far out there. I mentioned that to Vincent. Due to that, a wind has picked up quite considerably since I first started. I'm trying to get that feed line so I can bend it back over a rung just to keep it more under control for now, till we can go up there and retrieve the antenna, which we did a few days later. If there's one thing I like to do, that's talk and blabber on. As you can tell, I'm was talking there to Vincent, still am, just kind of waiting for this feed line to come back towards me. I think now's my chance. If I could just get it to come a little bit closer. You see there, I grabbed it. Not sure quite what I'd be telling him now. Probably something like, I've got it. And then I try to figure out, what I'm going to do. That sort of wrist coming back out. I really didn't want to twist that thing around the guy wire. Could have been asking for trouble. Thought about maybe having him bring me up some tape or something with the rope. Kind of also thought about just dropping it down there anyway. Being a good friend that Vincent is, he's putting the rope back into the bucket, which is a great help for somebody climbing the tower to do that. It means when they can get down, they can pretty much just go right on in or, be done with the job. They don't have to work on trying to... Yeah, you can see there I put it through the tower leg, and then I bend it up. Yes, I know that ruins a feed line, but considering how it's already been lopped off there anyway, I don't think anyone would mind. But anyway, he putting things in the buckets and things, and just keeping track of stuff on the ground is very helpful to the tower climber. Something I've gotten used to is I used to be very particular to my tools, not letting other people touch them or mess with them, particularly because my brother in years past have had a tendency to leave my tools out in the rain to get water and rust and whatnot, and never repay me back or offer a tool that's good and not rusted. But anyway, so a lot of times the ground crew guys would have to sift through my toolbox and stuff, and you just get used to it. And it's a lifesaver, having to save you a trip down to the bottom of the tower just for a little screwdriver, But like I said here, I'm not actually having that many tools. It's just the rope was the thing to keep track of, which was still really nice to have that just kept nice and orderly. Now the toll of me climbing this tower back up and down is really starting to take into effect. As you can see, I just stopped, and here I stop again. You can see there the positioning harness or lanyard is kind of twisted up, which just happens when you sort of sew it back and forth through the tower like a shuttle, like a crocheter or a knitter would. There you can see electrical tape holding on the cat cable, and that's probably one of the reasons why it broke off. Was sun degraded a portion of the tape, and ended up becoming hard and brittle, and then cracked under wind, and that's why it's kind of out there, kind of floating around right now. Well, not anymore after we tied it up. The Boy Scout mentality, you might say. And see, you can see here I'm also resting again. For someone who hasn't done this in probably a couple months, it was pretty tiring. I was telling him about something. I guess I'm not sure what that hand movement was for. But at this point, I'm probably getting pretty excited to be able to talk to him and get below the tree line into a more sense of comfort. Ah, I'm preaching on about something. Pointing, I guess, maybe to the tower Tim was on or something. Alright, enough talking, more moving. Here we go. Pull myself in, unhook the lanyard, pull back through. Okay, John, quit talking, let's get down. Now, it's going to be a little bit tricky going down because by this point I forget exactly how I got up the tower. And later, Tim would help out doing something else on this tower, and he was even pretty confused about how to get onto the tower. It was a chore, it ended up. And it comes down to that single point, which I thought was weird, which what makes me question whether or not this is a RON 45, but I'm guessing it is, especially by the way the bolts and everything are put on there. Either a RON 45 or 55, I might say. It's definitely not a 25. This one was more comfortable to climb than a 25 in respect that you actually have something to step on. Whereas a RON 25, you have just these little wire cross braces that are probably about a quarter-inch diameter rod that goes zigzags back and forth between the tower. And the step size is a little bit large, and it can be pretty clumsy to climb sometimes, but I know for one thing, being a bigger guy, it's a lot easier to do it in. See, the lead paint just fell. It's a lot easier to climb when it's you're in shorts and not jeans. Although that's not really. Oh, you see there, I'm telling him I'm going to drop it. I tell him don't try to catch it. You know, a $10 pulley is better than a $10,000 stitch job having to be done at the hospital because it hit your head. And I think at this point was about the time I decided it wasn't quite worth using I think I was telling him about one of the other towers. I was thinking about not using the positioning lanyard, or not positioning, the fall restriction, the gorilla hooks. Those are only really good. They expand out to about 15 or 20 feet. And, well, if you really have to be about 5 feet above that. So a good 20 or 25 feet above the air for them to be actually usable and effective. So between there, you're kind of on your own in terms of those actually working to help. They may actually hinder you and just get in the way. It's all things to keep in mind that until you're above that 20-foot mark, it's kind of pointless in a way. That's where your positioning would really help, where you could just clip off and relax and not stress so much about the beginning part if you can just get above there. You can see that other gorilla hook just swinging in the breeze behind me. I just thought it was clipped, but I guess it wasn't. All right, more move, less talk. So I think we were talking a little bit about how we're gonna, or me coming down the tower, but we're gonna talk here pretty quick about how I'm gonna maneuver this bottom section. I ended up, like I said but earlier, forgot about how to maneuver this bottom part. So what I ended up doing was actually going between the two feed line bits, and which was kind of a little bit dangerous in a way because I felt like I was going to trip over those heliaxes, those feed lines coming up towards the tower, but I wouldn't. Well, I did actually end up using my gorilla hook after all. Clunk. There I go again. You saw me bang my camera into the cross members. Did it again. You might have noticed there for a short period of time, I held onto the tower and unhooked that clip. If I was to fall at that instant, there would have been nothing to hold me back. And down I probably would have gone too. So now we got my positioning in, and here's where we're going to kind of discuss about how I'm going to maneuver this whole rock scenario. If I could get the thing clipped, I think that was my problem there. And I think I was also talking to him at this point in time about why I was coming down and the weather that seemed like it was creeping up on us. And you can see they have enough bolts in those tower legs, 3 on each leg, and an additional one going sideways. But I think that's for a side or a diagonal cross member. All right, now for the tricky bit. There goes one of the other generator keepers. They go around and I believe they check the generator oil and maybe gas level. We only have one up there at that site, and that's at that very far tower. And see, it's little things like this that kind of get tiring is things like the hook getting stuck. I'm sure glad that didn't happen to me while I was up in the air, because it just gets really frustrating, especially when you're just having to hold on and then the thing goes jumping, and then you're stuck kind of just dangling midair. And here's where I try to finagle my way down and get stuff organized. That's all I need to do is just get stuff organized and in its right spot. I'm thinking about. I'm actually using that cable that goes between the building and the tower to support me as I sort of land. I'm really worried about this point about landing on the rock and rolling my knee. That's a pain I really do not like, is rolling my knee. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching me climb up the tower for nothing. And to my ham radio friends, 73s, and hopefully there'll be some more content like this.